Okay, so now we're going to walk through module 6. Now, the first chapter here, chapter 12, it really starts getting into things like monetary and fiscal policy. So just understand when we talk about like supply side and demand side, what we're talking about are the two approaches that the federal government, the Treasury Department, and then through the Fed, the Federal Reserve Chairman is appointed by the president and approved through Congress, but they're actually a non-government entity. The Federal Reserve is actually a collection of bankers, but they, work on these policies, whether it's to spur demand or to spur supply. So that's what this is getting at. This relationship of 1 plus the real equals 1 plus nominal divided by 1 plus inflation, or you can write that as 1 plus real times 1 plus inflation is equal to 1 plus the nominal. This relationship was found by a guy named Irv Fisher. It was a Fisher equation. He got the Nobel Prize actually for that. So but yeah, and so just understand real is nominal over inflation, or real times inflation equals nominal. There's a lot here. I'm not going to read all of this out to you, but if you read through the explanation, hopefully that makes sense, because what's going on is we have wineries in different markets, and where the customer base is, and then where they're produced can be different. And so, well, that's what we're looking at here, is what's going on with and the different currencies that we have and their exchange rates changing. And as always, pause if you need additional time. Okay, and so again, monetary policy and fiscal policy. Monetary policy is like the control of money supply. Fiscal policy is how the government spends the money itself, right? So how big is that pie, and then how is the pieces sliced out? Okay, and then hopefully with the indicators you understood like leading indicators, lagging indicators, and then coincident indicators. And so obviously if I'm looking for things that are going to show me what's going to happen ahead of time, I need a leading indicator, not something that kicks off at the same time, right? It wouldn't be a signal that it's going to happen, it's a signal that it already has. Okay, and so like a defensive firm, below average sensitivity, think of that as like a beta less than 1, although it's a little more complex often than just the beta term, but that's what we're talking about with a defensive firm. This is something you invest in that you won't get the great returns during good times, but during bad times you also have hedged a lot, so that's the advantage. Again, let you definitely read through here. And now we're getting into like how different industries perform in different market conditions, right? And so if you're going to have a deep recession, going into healthcare makes sense because people get sick in recessions, and so it's not a cyclical type of firm, where stagflation, if you notice it said gold mining, well, gold mining is counter cyclical, so it does well in tough times and it does poorly in good times. It kind of goes opposite of what you would see in the general market. Okay. And then this is again what's known as an asset play, and that's where you're just seeing this mispricing. All right, now this one there was like a couple of required boxes and all that. And there's a lot to it. So I'll let you read through this. We've already had a similar, where we've used this data a couple of questions ago. And then the next slide will have the solution. So again, just pause as you need to read through that to make sure you understand what the answers are saying. All right, and this module actually has 3 different chapters, right, that we're going to go through. So next one we're going to do is obviously chapter 13. Now this one, I'm going to show you the formulas and that type of thing. Just to understand, it's the same type of financial ratios that you did in your intro finance class when we first took things out of accounting. The difference now, excuse me, is in some of these cases, it's not that we're using necessarily like the financial statement or anything like that, but just to make sure you understand what these terms are and other ways to build some of those relationships. So most of these are very similar in that way. And hopefully these equations are very familiar to you, right? The current value of a dividend that grows at a constant rate, right? The present value of that is the intrinsic value of the stock. And then here's looking at the growth rate, the company overall, right? Because we have what our earnings and then a return on the earnings, right? And then since the plowback ratio is 50%, or that means we keep 50% and put it back into the company. So it's this 1 minus the dividend ratio. So if ROE is 12 and they're keeping half of it, then they're going to grow at 6. And then the PE ratio based on what those growth rates are and that plowback. Like I said, these are very similar to what you've done earlier in some of these finance courses, like the intro finance class. In fact, you did quite a bit of this right here with the calculating the required return on a stock with a certain beta, right? All right, this is the same type of calculation that we just had. It's a little wordy at the beginning, but so feel free to take a moment to pause and read through this. But the formulas are just like what you've done in your earlier finance classes of calculating intrinsic value of a stock or calculating what the stock price will go to in the next period based on growth. So hopefully these are a review for you. So with the free cash flow, just to remind you, right, we're looking at actual cash in and out of the company, right? So that's why you're seeing things like depreciation, right, being added back in, because obviously we didn't actually pay that. But with our capital expenditures, we do need to take those out because that's going to be money that we actually spent to improve our capital stock. Right. And then any increase in net working capital, right, is obviously money that's not a free cash flow to use somewhere else. Right. That's why it's in net working capital now. Okay. And hopefully this makes sense to you. MoMe is Modigliani and Miller. And so if you want to learn more about this comparison of the levered and unlevered firm, right? That's what you would be looking at, Modigliani and Miller. That's when they wrote MoMe Corporation. Just a little aside there. All right, and so our last one is actually 11 questions instead of just the 10. But yeah, chapter 14, we'll just jump right into that one. right? And so this is just, again, a lot of the stuff that you have done based on accounting, right? And then the intro finance course. Right. And so things like inventory turnover, debt to equity, all of those issues, these are just what those formulas are. And we've, like I said, you've done these in a few of your other classes. So this hopefully will, if you don't remember it right away, hopefully you'll, this brief refresher will bring it back for you. And again, this is just to make sure you're understanding about the directionality of these types of cash flows so that you can better understand what's going on in this corporation. This part right here about the cash flow from operations having the interest paid to bondholders. This is just like one of those little asides, like almost not a trick question specifically, but it kind of reads that way a little bit. Because technically it is a financing cost, but they're like, no, if you need to put it under the free cash or the cash flow from operating, because it is a legal obligation, right? So it's like a bill. More than a financial payment. Sorry about that chime, by the way. All right, and this isn't a fraud class, so this is just more like, hey, what would be a good sign? So a decline in turnover, right? Why are they building this up? There's a thing called like channel stuffing, and this is where, if you've ever worked in retail and suddenly you get all these boxes of t-shirts or something, and you're like, why do we have this? You got to store it in the back room or something like that. Sometimes that'll happen because they're trying to push things through the system, right? And so they can show it somewhere else in the company and that kind of thing. So that's what this would be, one of those types of things where you're like, hey, if this number is changing this way and everything else is doing this, then that looks weird, right? And so that's what this is getting into. And hopefully you remember the DuPont formula, right? So net profit margin times the total asset turnover times the leverage ratio, right? And so they give you those so that you can calculate what the ROE is for that corporation. So the dividend payout ratio there is it's just, I'm not sure why I think it's just to see if you knew what you needed. I think is what that was for. It's kind of like a little trick question for you. And then this is the relationship between ROE and ROA, right? So return on equity versus return on assets. I know there's a bit of algebra in there, but you can see that the ROA is higher there. Okay, and so again, you see the formula down below for ROE, right? Or my return on equity, right? And so basically, I'm going to calculate my return, and then the margin turnover leverage, so. And then the last question for this module. Now, as always, if there are any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to email me, and I will answer all of them then. Thank you.